Hey, y'all. So I'm Sarah. I'm the product design director at ConsenSys. Anybody a designer in here? Oh, sweet. Yeah. All right. Okay, and those of you that are not designers, do you work very closely with one? Oh, this is so great. This is like half my talk isn't going to be cool. Anyway, this talk assumes that you agree that for us to realize this decentralized future, we have to make this space way more accessible for novice and new users. I want to talk first about the issues you already know about. Several people have already mentioned them today. Then I want to talk about the really low-hanging fruit, these easily fixable things, and then what are some techniques that anybody can do to start to fix these problems. We're getting to the point where we're past the tech, right? This is going to be one on user experience and the problems that we're solving for people. And it's what's going to take us past the hype and this nerdy interest that we have been enjoying for a little bit. So y'all may have seen this tweet back in January. It was pretty bad back then. Things were not great as far as usability. They are still not great. I've been putting out some bounties for like UX audits, but basically anybody can do them. It doesn't have to be a designer, and just taking screenshots as you go through, using Adapt and just writing what you think, what you're running into, what you're trying to do, just to get kind of a baseline. And so you'll see some screenshots throughout here from those audits. And what we're seeing is that very obviously novice users are really struggling. But even more than that, experienced users are really struggling. People that are, mid-level to very experienced. And if these were lemonade stand apps, it wouldn't be a big deal, but we're dealing with identity, we're dealing with large amounts of value. We have to stop messing around. So some people in the community, including us, have been talking about building a design system. So if you're familiar with like Google Material, that's more like a pattern library, like reusable components. Design systems tell you more about how to use those elements together and UX patterns, and focuses a little bit more on your specific users. But basically, it's a way to help developers that don't have design resources and designers that are newer to the space make better decisions and make better dApps. And so this screenshot is just the start of a component audit, just taking screenshots. What are we working with? Buttons, sliders, tables, building up to things like transaction patterns, et cetera. This type of thing will certainly help with baking in things like accessibility, performance budgets. It would make prototyping way faster, test your ideas faster. And there are definitely some patterns, like ones dealing with identity and transactions, that are pretty uniform across the board and would really benefit from some consistency. But I run into a lot of people that are looking for easy answers, and they want, and I'm guilty of this, they want principles for designing in this space, right? Do or don't show the hashes, and do or don't let them, the user deal with gas, or, give them all this information, or don't bother them, they're not gonna read that anyway. And if it was that easy to just write that down, I would not have a job. The truth is that all of the things that we're building are for different people that are trying to do a different thing, a different job, a different game they're playing or thing they're trying to buy. And so these UX patterns are not going to be uniform across the ecosystem. For example, I get asked quite a bit, what is the best interaction for MetaMask, right? When should I make somebody sign in, or when should I, how should I explain this to them? And people get really frustrated with me when I'm like, well, it depends. If you think about it, though, when you use Amazon, Amazon lets you do all sorts of things without ever signing in, right? Before they ever ask you to do any work, right? Because that's how it works. They don't want to put any friction between you and what you're exploring or learning about or looking for, or add it to your cart. They don't force you. So your dApp might want people to see what it's all about. You might want to have interactions that somebody can do without MetaMask. Or your dApp may be like a banking app, right? Where you have to sign in to do anything at all. And it's really just about doing what is appropriate for your users. Design principles have not changed. The way people interact, in an interface at least, has not changed. What's going on is that these principles, and this is just a few, some of my favorites, people are not applying them. It's just not happening, right? So really quickly, the big challenges that you already know about, and kind of what I see, at least at ConsenSys, of what people are doing about it. Gas, right? So you know how people would check ETH gas station to figure out how much gas they had to send? I found out a colleague of mine who's fairly experienced was just entering random numbers until the transaction went through, right? If it happens to a colleague that's in this space, like it's definitely going to happen to novice users. And then, you know, during CryptoKitties, people thought, CryptoKitty, the crisis, right? People thought Ethereum was broken, right? The tubes are clogged. And people were just underpricing gas. They didn't know, right? How were they going to know that? And so MetaMask gave them this button, and that fixed it. Here, reprice it. But I think that tells you a lot about what's going to happen. I really like this the most because this very clearly shows in this one little screen, it explains what is going to happen to, you know, this is what's going to happen, how you price your gas, it's going to go this fast. I think that's really simple and educational, and it doesn't take any of the power or the participation in the mechanism away from the user. Time, obviously, just a lot of spinny loaders. What I'd like to see, and I don't know how feasible this is yet, but telling people how long this is going to take, right? If that is possible, which it may or may not be, I know some people are attempting it, should definitely do that. But what bothers me more is getting left on a transaction page, right? It's a modal or something, and you get a spinner, and you just sit there, right? That is not a thing you need to do. Put it up in the corner, let them do something else. Give them another job, give them another task. Private keys. People are working very hard on this. My colleagues at Uport, you know, things like sharding and having friends and families be family, singular, be part of your key recovery, or having a mix of humans and devices and institutions be part of your key recovery, or, you know, I'm not a big fan of biometrics. That they are an imperfect solution, but maybe in combination with other things. And this and gas are really a tightrope for design because we've got to make this easy, right? But we can't take away so much control that we've centralized it all over again, and you know who I'm talking about. So this is the rant part. There are some very easy things that we can do to make these experiences way better. People will deal with gas and private keys and stuff, and that's not great, but there are things that I'm seeing over and over and over. One is there is no communication. This is, you know, we just dead end people. They get to the end of something and they get stuck. Nobody's thought through, like, you know, what if this or what if that, and they're just left there, right? The end. So I like how MetaMask has messaging. I like steppers, tell people where they are in a process, let them know how much longer is this gonna take. It's just communicating and active guidance. This happens a lot. People are not used to signing in or being on Web3. Like, over and over, somebody tries to do something and it's not working and they don't know why. So I like in Gitcoin, you know, how their big red message that says, you've got to unlock MetaMask, right? But a lot of the time, you've got you know, a beta dApp that is on a testnet, and you know, your users that are on there, they're not following your product roadmap very closely to know if you're on mainnet yet or not. So people, it's really frustrating, and it's really easy to just tell them. Obviously, language and data is still a problem, and this is a moving target. Avoid jargon, and there's no way you're ever going to catch these words, right? Because you're used to them. The designers, you are used to these words by now. You're not going to remember that you didn't know what that word meant. And I would also just caution to be very careful with your metaphors. So, like the term wallet, that worked for a while, right? Still works, we're still using it. But you know, when my Ether wallet and my crypto split, and people on Twitter were freaking out because they extended the metaphor. Wallets hold money, right? Where's my money that's in the wallet? You know, it just didn't make sense to them that they couldn't extend that metaphor. And when people are stressed and it's high stakes, they're not going to think all that rationally or remember that they read something somewhere. So a big misconception is that visual design is about making things pretty. Prettiness, beauty is an output. It's an artifact of things being organized, things having a hierarchy, the elements having meaning, right? So visual design has to be consistent. I would use a design system or even a style guide. And you're teaching your users a visual language for when they're not reading, which is literally all the time they are not reading. So this bright red, you save that for emergencies. And all of the other colors begin to mean things in an interface. So people also pick up consciously and unconsciously when things are unintentional, when no thought has been put into the design of something. You can feel it. It feels really shady, right? Like, nobody spent any time on this. Like, they probably are going to scam me. Okay, so I don't like to throw shade, but I'm upset. We're all in here doing our best, right? So I don't like calling out anybody because, you know, we are all in this together. These are buttons from a design team in this space, and they're pretty, right? Very calming buttons. I did a contrast checker. Not one of them passed, okay? Contrast is one of the easiest things you can do, even in your design program. In Sketch, you can just click a button and it will check your contrast, right? It's super easy to do that. And so if people aren't even doing contrast, then that means, you know, they're not making considerations for a screen reader. You're not going to be able to navigate this stuff with a keyboard. The Ethereum community is a really inclusive space in my experience. And this is leaving out 284 million people with low vision. So this is a designer at Civil, a journalism platform. This is a screenshot of her testing out and deciding to use a card format because this is what it looks like when you have glaucoma. I think, to quote a friend of mine, the reason Ethereum exists is because the current structures of finance, governance, and everything else were not adequately inclusive, and if we're going to rebuild these things, we can't leave all these people out. So what do we do? One of the easiest things you can do is just journey mapping. How are people finding your dApp? And what is motivating them? What are they looking for? What are they trying to accomplish? But when you're forced to map out step by step what somebody is doing with no interface, no talking about the code, you start to see, and when you map out what somebody is thinking while they're doing that and what they are feeling while they are doing that, you can start to notice the problems, you can pinpoint them, and then you can prioritize them as things we must solve now, things we must solve in 6 months. It allows you to see major pain points when you're talking about what is the experience now, right? What are they trying to accomplish, how they do that now? And then what do we want it to look like in the future? But it also allows you to uncover a lot of issues that have zero to do with blockchain. So again, this is Civil. In their research and in their mapping, they found out that most of the consumers and the content consumers had no idea how to evaluate quality journalism, right? So they came up with these credibility indicators to help educate their readers, and it was a huge success. People felt more empowered, and they understood what to look for and had significantly reduced anxiety about it. But also when you map out what somebody is trying to do, you really begin to anticipate their needs. I kind of visualize like a butler. But these are tiny details, but they really add up when you know what somebody's trying to do and why. After you kind of make some assumptions about an experience, you must validate them. You have to bring your users in and ideate with them. But there are a ton of remote tools nowadays. It's super easy to actually talk to your users. I don't love it. People and strangers scare me, but it's absolutely necessary. So definitely do that. Definitely prototype low fidelity. I don't think anybody enjoys throwing away large chunks of code, and you can find out so much just drawing it out and showing it to a user and being like, where would you look for this? Or, do you understand all the words that are here? It's way easier also if you run into a problem to pivot, right? Once you've started coding something, you've committed and you're going to be biased towards this being the right solution, right? But this, if you keep it low fidelity for as long as possible, it allows you to change your mind, right, and get a better solution. So TCRs and governance and voting and microtipping and prediction markets, these are some of the topics that designers are having to get better at in this space. People are not always going to be motivated by money, like the machines. This is my visualization of the state of TCRs right now. Like, we got all this cool stuff happening, but there are literally no pathways for users in there, right? Nobody is saying, this is why somebody would go participate in this system. The challenge is to design an experience that is going to be delightful and usable, but is also sustaining the system. So something that I love about low fidelity prototyping for something like that is act it out. So it started at our retreat. We started live action role playing the blockchain just as a teaching method, but it kind of took off and we started learning a lot about it. So this is Civil at Ethereal acting out commit reveal voting. And it allowed them to empathize with their users and catch problems before they'd even designed it, before they'd even coded it. So it was pretty cool, and I recommend it. There's a lot of stuff to do, right? Even in that small bit, you don't have to do it yourself. Hire a designer. If you have one, trust them. Treat them as a partner. If you want help understanding the different types of designers or you want help hiring them, please reach out to me. I will help you. I want more designers in here helping build this future. And I want very much for Ethereum to succeed. I think we have a lot of lofty goals, and I think we've been given a huge opportunity. But let's bake in inclusiveness and human-centered problem solving while it's still early.